Hi guys, I want to show you this edit of an image I shot the other day, which is during the storms we had down here in the southwest. So this is a raw file. We're opening it in Camera Raw within Photoshop, and I'm just going to go through some edits for you just so you can get an idea of what I would do. First thing I want to do is look at the white balance. I'm going to go up to the white balance tool here, click on that, and click on the sand. That's, to me, will give me the most accurate indication. The sand is kind of like a neutral grey, and a lot of time I will click around in different spots, click on rocks, click on the water, just go what is giving me the color that I like the most. But that area there is pretty much what I experienced when I was out shooting it. The other thing I want to look at is just making sure that I've got my sharpness right, and also maybe adding a little bit of extra color through that water there. So if I go to my HSL slider, make sure selection is saturation is selected, click on the targeted adjustment tool, click anywhere on the color I want to adjust, and I'll just bring that up just to add a little bit more saturation through there. I can then do the same with the rocks, adding a bit of saturation through there. But you can see the rocks are quite light. They seem like they've got some sort of highlights on them, and they're not rich and dark, but we're going to fix that in Photoshop. Okay, go back, let's go to our sharpening tab here. I like to have a sharpening around 80 with a radius of 0.5, and then I'll look at the masking, holding the Option or Alt key, click on masking and bring that down. Okay, where did you go? Masking, and just apply the sharpening where it's really needed. You don't necessarily need it in the water, but more on the rocks. So at that point I'm reasonably happy. I'm going to go back and look at my dehaze. Is a great tool, adds heaps of nice crunchy contrast to the file, and I'm going to add some light to the shadows just so they're not sort of gone. And looking at the highlights, my whites seem to be there. The histogram showing that. You get a classic histogram shape here. It's a bit of a spike. We got some lights and some darks. Not so much in the way of midtones, but it's okay. So vibrance, yes and no, maybe just a touch. Adds a little bit of something. But I create these images, and I never really know where it's going until the end. So I'll have one color 1 minute, and then it'll be the next color. And I'm sure you all edit the same way. You don't always have a pure idea in mind of where it's going to go. So I'm pretty happy with that. Just going to make sure that we don't have any chromatic aberrations. So I just clicked on that. Everything else I'm pretty happy with. I don't want to mess with anything else too much. It was a fairly easy capture. Shot on the SL2, the new Leica SL2. Shameless plug for Leica, my new favorite camera at the moment. And I'm going to make sure that this text down here, we can click on that and make sure we're in 16-bit. I'm using ProPhoto as my color space. Normally it's DCAM 3, but I don't have it loaded on this computer, and we want to go out at the image size as the default. Click OK, and then open the image. Okay, there's our photo there, and pretty happy with that. It's all pretty nice. I'm going to get rid of a few things. I'm going to fix up a few things, and I'm going to put a new sky in, get rid of that, maybe possibly squish it a little bit, just to give it a little bit more up and down, and then get rid of some of these spots and stuff like that down there. First thing I want to do is I want to create some more. I want to create a square out of this, and I'm going to put a new sky in. I think it just could do with a bit of sky. So let's have a look and see what we can do with that. Going to the background, and I'm just going to add some space to the top, and that would be a good idea. So I'm going to make sure that the white space, the height I'm going to put in, is going to go to the top, and I'm going to put in 20 inches. So there we have It's bigger than a square, that's okay, but you want to give yourself more space than less. I'm going to go to the marquee tool, the rectangular marquee, so it's M on the keyboard, and I'm just going to draw a rectangle like so, and go Command T, and I'm just going to drag that up, just so that when we start blending our skies, we've got a bit of sky in the background there to blend onto. Okie dokie. So the next thing would be to cut out this foreground, and I'm a bit of an old school kind of guy, and I like to do things the hard way, possibly, but the easy way initially is using the the quick selection tool, and we're just going to run a selection out across the top there and pick up what we can. And if we zoom in, we can see that it's picked up my horizon pretty good all along there. It's picked up through there quite nicely, and there's only a couple of things that it's gone over the water. We want to bring that back. So if I use a lasso tool, oopsie, I accidentally clicked, sorry about that. Hold down the Option key because we want to remove some of that. Click once, draw a straight line across the other one, and just go around that, and then click it there. So that's been removed, and I'm going to do the same over here. Make sure we don't mess it up too much, but and that looks like a bit of an odd little bump there, so let's go through here, and now we've got pretty much what we want selected. Zoom out, Command 0 will give you the full screen view, and we're going to invert that, Command Shift I, and that will give us that. Now I'll just remove this bit here because I don't want to cut that out. So if I hit an Option key, click once, twice, and just draw a box around it, and that just deselects that. Okay, now we're going to put this selection up on its own layer, Command J, and there we have it cut out. Okay, so now we've got room to put our new sky, and click on the background layer. I have a sky already here ready to go. There it is, and I'm just going to drag and drop that shot on the Leica as well. It's a pretty dramatic sky, and I'm going to put that in there somewhere and just arrow that down like so, and I'm going to then select Command T or Control T, and I'm just going to drag that side out, just get rid of that distracting stuff that shouldn't be there, and it kind of helps spread the love a little bit. Let's go back, and there's our new sky, but obviously that looks fake as hell, so we don't want it to be fake, we want it to look good. So what we can do is we can duplicate that layer and add a screen blend mode to that, and then all of a sudden the sky looks light, and it's more about down here on that area there, where you want that blend to work. Now it can get a little bit crunchy, you can round off some of your detail, so we got a couple of options. Before we do that, we can just delete that one again. Let's just see what happens when we do this. We'll add a layer mask, G for gradient, and we can just blend that up like so. That's probably a bit much. The further you take it, the more gradual it can look. No, not good. So it's starting to look a little bit more natural, and you get some of the other details back that you've destroyed with that hard edge. Now I'm going to duplicate it now, Command J, and add my screen blend mode like so, and now it looks like it's a fairly good fit. It's obviously a little bit too hot at the top there, so I'm going to use my brush tool, select the mask, paint with black as my foreground color, drop the opacity back to 30%, get a big ass brush, and with a right square bracket just make it bigger, and I'm just going to brush that back so that it looks kind of cool, and we haven't lost too much detail. The sky is kind of brooding and moody, but then where it's near the horizon that blends much, but that kind of blends okay. So right now it's not a square, so let's have a look at making that into a square. So go C for crop. I've got all sorts of different crops, but square is pretty easy. Just select square there, and then you just go for it. You can see what we've got. Make sure that my foreground's in, because I want that. There's our sky, and I'm just going to come across a little bit on the right there, just because I didn't like that little bit of rock on the right hand side. Looks fairly square, and I quite like that composition. We could probably come down a little bit more. Yeah, that's pretty good. The sky is in the top third. Hit return, and there we have a bit of a start. So from there, yucky sky to something that's believable and quite nice. Okay, let's work on some other stuff. Okay, I'm pretty happy with the sky. Happy with what else I've got going on. Obviously we need more light. So let's just flatten that, because this is what I do. And I'm going to show you how I can, or how you can, add a little bit more extra contrast and color to those rocks. So we got to we can duplicate that layer, Command J, and I'm going to change the blend mode of that down to soft light. Already those rocks are going pretty dark and grungy, and I'm going to go to filter, and I'm going to go to blur, Gaussian blur, and I'm just going to add a bit of a blur to those. You can see it's added, it's only a small amount, but it's kind of given it a nice kind of soft roundness, which is kind of cool, which I like. It's not going to be that harsh at the end, but you'll see before and after those rocks are already starting to look a bit more interesting. But we've crushed the blacks. So if we double click on that grey bar there, we're going into the blend if sliders, and we're going to option click on this one here, on this layer, the black slider, and we're going to move it down to 100. I'm going to move the second half to 50, and this is going to feather our effect. And if you look at the preview before and after, you can see it's brought our shadows back, but we've still got that other good stuff going on. So if I click OK, and then you can see how the rocks look much better. Now if we zoom out, it's really made the water pretty crunchy, so may not want it that strong. We can click and bring the opacity back. Still a bit too strong, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to avoid that water altogether. I'm going to add a layer mask. I'm going to invert it so it's black, Command I or Control I, and I'm going to use my brush tool, B for brush, X to make my foreground color white if it's not white already, and I'm going to just start brushing in with 100% opacity, detail back into those rocks like so, and that's just going to make them look cool. And I'm being a little bit rough here because I'm doing this for speed, but when I get around to the tops of these rocks, you know, if you're lazy, you will muff it, but for just a little quick second you can add a good selection of those rocks, and it will make your job easier and it'll make it look much more professional. So I'll show you what I mean. If I get lazy, I can go like this. Oh, look at that, beautiful job. We don't want that. Some people would do that. They might only be subtle, they might just go like that and you just barely see it, but we don't want that. Click back on the background layer, zoom in nice and close, use your quick selection tool and just select those rocks, or the outside of those rocks. It's doing a reasonably good job, like so, and a little bit more there. And then we can then just look at where, hold down the option key and just click where you want it to come back, and you can just, everywhere else looks pretty good. Pretty happy with that. I'm going to invert that, Command Shift I, and now we're going to go back to our selection, the layer above, with our brush tool selected this time, and we're going to go over those edges, and see you can go right over the edge and not worry about affecting the water. That's pretty important. You hit the backspace key, you can see if you've missed any areas. I can see I've missed a bit there and there, so let's see, don't know why it does that. Sometimes you are on the one thing, but you go to this quick selection, sorry, the backspace to see what you've brushed, and that happens. That doesn't happen, and it changes the brush, which is kind of weird. Anyway, down here as well, that's all a bit rough, loosey goosey, but that's okay. And then hit the backspace key again to get that back, and then Command D to deselect. So now when we look at that, you see our rocks have got way more voomph, if that's the word, voomfa. Let's add a bit of saturation to those. Quick, so the hue saturation adjustment layer, click the little hand, find your color, add a bit more oomph to them like that, zoom into 100%, and then I might just adjust the color 3% hue shift, or maybe 4 or 5, 4 or 3, 3 is good, saturation, and that's just added a bit of nice color, because those rocks are quite red down there, but they weren't down there that morning, they weren't that red. So there we have now a bit more color and life into those rocks, which I think is kind of nice. Now that rock in the foreground there has kind of, it's like it's missed a bit, hasn't it? So what we can do, let's try something a bit tricky. Let's use the eye on the keyboard from the eyedropper tool. So let's select a color that we like. That's like an orangey color, and that will set our foreground. And that's a bit boring actually. Sorry, let's go to try that again. Go to the background layer, and then select, and you can see that color has been selected there. We can now go back to the top and add a solid color adjustment layer, like so, and that adds that color as a adjustment layer on top. Click OK and change the blend mode down to color. It's pretty awful. That's okay, we don't mind. We're going to select the layer mask and invert it. And we're going to B for brush, and painting with white as our foreground color, and our our opacity down to 10%. And then we're just going to rub over that. Actually, what we might do is, let's put our opacity up to 30%, but our flow down to 10%. And as we're rubbing, it'll just build up the effect. And as you can see there, we're just getting a little bit more color into those rocks, because they're a little bit grey. It's nice to have a little bit more substance. Be careful that they don't look artificially brushed on. See that? You've got to be careful where you're brushing. Over here needs a little bit more. And let's have a look to see what difference that's made. Just fix that area up a bit. Maybe a little bit in there. Okay, we ready for this? Before, after. Let's zoom out. Before, after. I like that a bit better. Just, there's a little bit more on that side there I need to do, because that's a little bit distracting as well. I'm being a bit rough with this, but you get the general idea. So again, before, after. Okay, so now we're getting there. We've got those colors sorted. We need to add a bit more light. I think it's a bit lacking in areas. And one of my obviously favorite ways is the easy way. I love the easy way. And I'm just going to go to curve adjustment layer and change the blend mode to screen. When you do that, it tends to make everything a little bit washed out, like so. Sometimes I'll just bring the black point and the curve back a bit just so that it's light but we still got a bit of contrast there. Select inverse, Command I or Control I, select our brush tool and make the right square bracket, make the brush bigger, and we're just going to rub some light back in there. Again, I've got a low opacity and a low flow, and I'm just rubbing over that area and just leaving the foreground a little bit darker, but that beach is the important part. We want our light to be coming from the middle of the image, and I'm just going to drop my opacity back a bit here, so my size of the brush, just add a bit more light through there. Let's have a look before, after. So that looks way better, something like that. Again, you got to watch those. You've got to watch the top of that thing. If you start doing crazy stuff like rubbing there, look at that. That's going to look bad. You can see it'll look bad. All right, that's looking pretty cool. Next thing, I might add a bit of darkness to that sky, and let's go with a curve adjustment layer. Going to use a little hand there, and I'm going to grab one of these darker areas and I'm just going to pull down on that curve like so, and then I'm going to grab this point here which will control a bit of the saturation. Just pull it down so it's darker but not necessarily more saturated. Okay, like that. Layer mask, invert it, Command I, Control I, and then you can just brush that with white in there and just get a bit of darkness going on through that area there, like so. Let's just go fully bombed. Make your brush a bit bigger, and then just don't mess around. Drop the opacity back. Sometimes I'll drag it down the sides a little bit as well, and maybe add a little bit to that foreground just to focus your eye, sort of like a vignette. Focus your eye into the important parts of the image. Let's have a look at that before and after. That does hold my eye in a better spot, but I'm looking at that there and it's kind of a bit distracting. You can kind of see the roundness a little bit, so I will go back, paint with white, smaller brush, low opacity, and just, oopsie, wrong way, just bring that back a smidgen. That's where the light's coming from, so it probably should be there. There you go. And maybe a little bit, take a bit off here. We could actually add a bit more light to those rocks too. Let's go back to the top. Another curve. Let's just bang. It's basically doing this screen blend mode anyway, which is by bringing that up. Too much. And then inverting that, and then brushing a bit more light in there. Which we can get through there. Maybe a bit more on that beach. Hell, why not? We can do anything we want. No one's going to buy it anyway. There we go. A bit more light through there. Better. Starting to look pretty cool. The sky color is a little bit sort of not quite right. At this point I might go in and do a 3D LUT, and I'm going to look at my favorite teal and orange, see what that does. I'm going to add a gradient, a shift click and drag wrong way. Always go the wrong way, like so, just so that it's kind of blending, and then drop the opacity back on that layer and see what happens. And that's completely off, bit purple, probably a bit more blendy. Don't know if teal and orange is the one to go for. Maybe we can look at something else. I mean, there's so many of these crazy things that that one's kind of made it a bit more grey. I don't know. I'm confused. Let's just delete that for a sec and sit back and think about it. That's the gallery just calling me. I'll call you back. It just seems like, well, maybe it's alright. I'm going to do something. I'm just going to add another curve adjustment layer. Oh boy, can I call you back? Obviously there's something really important going on, so I might have to ring them very soon. Messages are coming in. God, there's hell's broken loose. I'm going to add a screen curve layer, invert it, B for brush. Just seems like there needs to be a bit of light in that middle section. Don't quote me on that. Let's have a look. 10%. Just add a little bit more light under there. Felt like the horizon was a bit too dark. Let's have a look. That's pretty good. I like that better. Doesn't seem so heavy in the middle, like there's a black spot. Okay, gonna do a little, let's flatten that, sorry. Let's do a little border around it, Command Option C. We're gonna go 4" by 4" border, click OK, and that doesn't look too bad. I like that. It's always nice to look at it with a bit of a border around it. Let's go back. Let's go to our history. Add a snapshot and go back to the start. So let's have a look before and after. Before, dog, after, not so doggy. Before, after, before, after. I like that. I think that's okay. Well guys, there you are. There you have. That's my workflow. That's the way I like to go. Obviously I would go in and touch up all these things I said I was going to touch up. So there's rocks and these footprints and all that sort of stuff. And that would be, but you can do that. Anyone can do that. That's easy. All right, I'm going to go. I better go ring the gallery back. I'll be in trouble. So we'll catch you next time.